I put this show together as my off-season antics for the American Hot Rod Association. I really didn't feel it belonged in the American Hot Rod Association, so I created another channel that was focused specifically on just what I was doing during the off-season. And there was a lot of people that were interested when I was doing the Uncle Tony's garage shows, where he would come out and check out the things I was doing. Or, you know, I'm still doing the Wednesday night Tech Talk Live, but we never really got down deep and dirty into anything that I was really doing. There was a lot of interest in my super stock Buick Small Block that was just what a lot of people felt was like Frankenstein or odds and ends, but in reality, it's about like 1972 modified or super stock drag racing classes. The guys did this stuff all the time at home, but I found that the techniques and knowledge behind it was kind of gone now. And so it was unique and different to see how these things were done. And really, it is all I learned it from. I didn't really learn it from anyone. I had a bunch of old hot rod magazines, and you read up on it, and you'd see how people did it back then. And then it's just based on what you've done in the past, so you just apply it to today. Now, I'm not the world's greatest mechanic, and I'm definitely not a metal fabricator or anything guru like that. I'm just a regular guy in a regular garage. I use regular tools. Some of the stuff I got is taking a lifetime of collecting stuff, of tools, just to have the tools that I have. So if you see something that I'm using that it's not normal, the regular guy has it. I mean, I got like a blast cabinet, and the regular guy don't normally have that. But you can easily go out and just rent these tools from a tool rental place. But, you know, without further ado, and talking all day long, you know, you got the basic, I guess I don't have a cameraman anymore. Normally when I did the AHRA Drag Racing History channel, my wife would do the camera. So I just decided to do it myself on my cell phone. I'm sorry if it looks like crap or the audio's garbage or you don't like the way that I smell or whatever is coming through your screen there. But hopefully you enjoy what we do on this show. So that's a quick rundown, nitty gritty, down and dirty of what's happening. I'm trying to figure this whole camera out, so bear with me. I'll get it all ironed out sooner or later. But that's our intro. So we're going to get down to some brass tacks. And today's brass tacks are going to be Buick rocker arms. I was working on a set last year when everyone was kind of intrigued by this super stock Buick. And I'll show you what I did, what I concluded, you know, and how we got to where we are. I'm still waiting on a tool so I can finish this setup, but I'm going to take this apart and you can see what and how things work. Okay. All right, so we're back. This is my workbench. I flipped the camera around. I don't necessarily know how to do that on the phone yet while you're video recording, so I'm going to stick this into the holder so you can actually see what's going on here. And let's see. All right. So here is my bench, and I'm sure I'm going to be a bit low. I want you to see what's going on, but I also need you to see what I'm doing, right? Okay, so here is your basic set of Buick rocker arms, okay? This is actually for a small block Buick, and this is from a 68, 69 Buick 350, okay? Now, my Buick super stock motor is based off of a Buick 350, which is a derivative of the 300, the 340, the 215. So a lot of the parts are very interchangeable. These rocker arms are not interchangeable, but what is interesting about them is when Buick in 67 developed the big block, the 400, 430, 455 family, these rocker arms, they are interchangeable, the individual rockers themselves. The shafts, not so much, okay? But the reason why I chose the 68, 69 is it has the highest ratio rocker, and it's all aluminum, so it's lightweight. And then also on the bottom here, if you see the I don't know what you would call this, the lower shaft area, it's not on a Ford, it'd be like the trunnion mount or something, but on the Buick, it's just the lower shaft, right? So I guess I'm making that up right now. Hopefully that's what it's called. it has quite a bit of surface area. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about all these and how they work and what's the benefits and drawbacks of each one. So first things first, I'm going to show you how to disassemble these. If you notice on the Buick, they put these, what looks to be like a freeze plug on the end, okay? And I don't know if you can see it all that well, but the freeze plug caps it off, and then the Buick on a 68, 69 small block, or even the 67 through 69 big blocks, are fed oil up through the head into the shaft. Okay, the shaft then spits out oil behind each one of these rockers and lubricates the rocker arms and the top of the push rod, because it's a solid push rod, there is no oil coming through them, and then the top of the valve here on the rocker side. Pretty much just like a Mopar. I think all Mopar big blocks and small blocks are like that until you get to the later models. But it's a simple design, real easy. But what I'm doing is I'm converting this to something else. But we're going to disassemble these, and you can see how they go together. So first things first, we got to remove the caps. The easy way to do it is, if you don't plan on reusing the cap, I drill a hole in the end. And this gives me the ability to at least knock one end off, and I can usually save that other end if I want to use it later somewhere down the road. But so I drilled a hole in there, pre-drilled a hole, and this is just like a, I think 7/16 hole, and I use a handy dandy rod that I just buy from Lowe's that you use for fabrication or grounding or whatever you want. But I just use it for crap like this. So first things first, you stick the shaft down in the hole after you've already drilled it, and you'll find that it's probably filled with a bunch of what I like to call dino goo. It's not necessarily made of dinosaurs. I don't know what it's made of. But the rocker shafts themselves, since they are, they have oil going through them all the time, the rocker shafts themselves fill with this crud over time, and that's what we're looking at. You see some here on the end of this drill bit. For some reason, the Buicks always get like this gray crap, and I think it's what's left over. Get yourself a hammer, and all we're going to do is drive the other cap off. Okay. That simple. All right, so we saved ourselves an end cap we can use later on a different project. And you generally got to do this anyway, just so that you can clean out the inside of the rocker arms on the Buick. But what you'll find here is we pull our shaft out. Let's see, a rod, there it is. And normally I would drive this end off as well, because I mean this cap is going to go in the trash. But we'll take these apart. Okay, so what we need to do is for our next thing is I'm going to weigh this. So you want to try to keep these in order. If you look at the end of the behind the cap is a spring. This spring just holds tension from the back of the cap against this first rocker arm. So you try to keep these all in order. All right, because they do go on in a specific order. Buicks have left and right rocker arms, or intake and exhaust rocker arms, whatever you want to call it. But normally they're labeled in the books as left and right. All right, so there we go. Rocker arms off. Okay, and your shaft is pretty much clean. You just need to knock the other end off. Let me get this spring off of here before I forget it, and it's completely gone forever. But as you can see there is a bunch of, I guess you'd call it dino goo or plant goo or earth bleeding goo or whatever you want to call it, but it's a bunch of crap left over from motor oil running through these. And the only thing I did was drill a hole in it, and I mean it's still got oil and all kinds of crap on it because I plan on cleaning everything up before I even put it back together. But there's a big thing that I got to do before I get to that point. All right, so the first thing I did was I ran into an issue with my super stock motor where the where I couldn't necessarily find any rock arms that were in my price range. I ran into problems. I really wanted a set of T&D rockers, but they're limited on the diameter of the spring. The spring can only be 1.336 inches max diameter when otherwise it hits the bottom side of the rocker arm from T&D. So of course my springs were 1.445 in diameter, and I was looking at cutting into the rocker arm or using a different rocker arm. So I came up with this plan, and I'm going to break it down for you here of what we really got, because I don't necessarily know if in the future I'll be able to afford a set of T&Ds, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to set it all up to where it'll all work, but I can live with this set of rocker arms now and with the valve train components that I have that will work with T&D later. So we're just going to build a set of rocker arms, but what I wanted to do with rocker arms are Buicks literally have 4 different style of rock arms for the small block. Okay, so this here, we'll take one without metal shavings on it. So when you're talking drag racing, you know, weight is your enemy, right? That's what you'll find is weight is your enemy, and especially in valve train components, because your valve train's moving back and forth so fast that the reciprocating or oscillating mass is actually damaging at certain points, and it creates resonance or it creates friction and heat just based on because you have so much mass. So what I did was, like, I needed to find a set of lightest rocker arms that I could, but yet it needed to fit within my budget. So I had 4 different variants of rocker arms, okay? So we'll start off. This is a, we'll say 61 through 67 Buick Small Block 215, 300, 340 rocker arm, okay? And this is a 1.6 to 1 ratio. And they're pretty much the same across the board on those engines. But what I wanted to do was, all right, well, these are aluminum. They're lightweight, right? Let's see what they weigh. Okay, so we got 49 grams for this one. The next evolution of the small block Buick became the 68 through 69 rocker arm used on the 350 Buick. All right, well, let's see what this guy weighs. It's aluminum, so it can't be too heavy compared to this one. So we're at 59 grams. It weighs 10 grams more. Here's your 1970 through 72 Buick rocker arm. These were used on the small block and the big block. I'm hoping I'm in frame here. Let's see what it weighs. This one does have a downside to it, besides the weight, apparently, because it's 65 grams, so it's now 5 grams heavier than this one. These have a problem where they eat into the shaft, and I think a lot of it has to do with the thickness of the underside area. It doesn't spread the load of the spring well, and it ends up chewing into the steel shaft. Okay, so this one, 65 grams. So we got 49, 59, 65. And then here's the one everyone runs, that if you're on a budget with a Buick, this is the one you run. They are a heavy steel, stamped steel shaft, or a rocker arm, I'm sorry. And they are a 1:5:5 ratio, okay? Just like this one is actually like 1:5:4, okay? This one is a 1:5:5 ratio. The higher the ratio they have, the more, the faster that the valve opens and closes, the more duration that you have when comparable to a smaller ratio rocker arm, the more lift you have when you have a higher ratio compared to a smaller ratio rocker arm. NASCAR cars and even pro stocks and stuff like that are looking at like almost a 2-to-1 ratio these days. They're up at like 1.8, 1.9. They found the faster that you move the valve and the less that the action that's happening at the camshaft, the more powerful and explosive the cam is, okay? So you want the highest ratio possible. and then the lightest weight. So we'll turn this dude back on. I've been rambling on long enough that it went off. But, okay, so here's your 73 and on up, 86 grams. Okay, so 86 grams, 65 grams, 59 grams, and 49 grams. This one obviously would be the ideal choice, but as I told you before, Buicks have the small block Buicks, the 350 specifically, has a left and a right rocker. And that's because of the valve orientation on the 300 and the 350 is completely different. And we'll go on over and we'll check that out. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so you look at the 350 Buick here. All right, this is your 73 model, I guess, 350 Buick. And it has your rocker stands cast in the head. The 215, 300, 340 actually has the rocker stands on the shaft. And there's a large bolt that goes through the center and bolts down to the head. So this would be flush. But if you look at the valve arrangement here, you have an exhaust, which is this guy, your intake, exhaust, intake, exhaust. You can tell by the ports being here, obviously what they are. And this gives you a valve arrangement where your intake ports are Siamese, very much like a small block Chevy, okay? And the reason why this is the way that it is that Buick's engine line, they always wanted to feel like if you had a small block Buick, you wanted it to look like a big block Buick. They all had the same characteristics. They looked one and the same. You wanted the engines to look similar, okay? And I'll show you this to you right here. This is a 215 Buick out of that 63 Buick Special. The valve covers, if you look, are very, very similar to a nail head. Matter of fact, this engine and the 300 and the 340, but the 340 wasn't as bad because it had a different set of valve covers, always get confused with nail heads. These are not a nail head. This is a completely different design. Matter of fact, this was so cutting edge. This was Motor Trend Car of the Year. This was, this engine evolved into all kinds of stuff, including Formula One. It's what ended up being a Repco V8. Okay, but if you look at the valve arrangements, it's completely different. The 350 has the two exhaust ports Siamese in the center. The 215 has the two intake valves in between. You look at the ports up here on top of the intake, you have two intake ports next to each other. It's the opposite of what the 350 Buick head is. Okay, if you look, your intake ports are not in the center. That is a heat crossover and for emissions and for heating of the carburetor. But your intake ports are directly next to each other. Okay, so to make it simple, here's a set of 300 heads. And you can see the valve arrangement on the 300 head. Intake port, intake, and then another intake. On the other side is exhaust that are the opposite of this. Okay, there is a extremely different shape of the intake runner. Okay, look how tall and narrow these ports are. All right, that to me is where your LS design came from. Tall, narrow port. Keeps the port velocity high, which creates a lot of torque. The 300, very wide and square. Okay, but if you look in that runner, you can see all the way down to the valve. Right, it's actually a very good flowing head when you compare it to a 350 Buick, which we're just going to look down the intake runner, and you can see the back of the valve. But what you don't notice here is what they call the pinch. All right, the intake port pinch is there's a bump right inside there that you can see right now. That's caused by your push rod. Okay, your push rod hole causes it to have pinch like that. That's what sucks about those two intake ports side by side. The Buick 200 or the 215 and 300 and 340 was designed originally to have the valve arrangement of the nail head, and that is why it doesn't have the pinch. The push rods were taken into account to begin with, and it doesn't have the pinch. But back to our rocker arms. So we've determined this is the second lightest set at 59 grams. This one being 49, I cannot use this rocker arm because the valve or the arrangement of the rocker arm, if you look, there is no left and right set, right? You see how it's curved and offset on the 350 Buick? You have your push rod would come in here like on the extreme right-hand side of the rocker arm, which I guess it'd be the trunnion area or the surface area of the shaft is considerably bigger on this 350 one. But the whole entire push rod is set off to the side. This one is centered. And you can even see how it's angled differently here at the top. So this one won't work unless I was running a 215, 300, 340 style cylinder head. Okay, so it's a no bueno. So out of all the 3 rocker arms I got here, this would be the lightest. It also has the largest shaft area here. And this is exactly what you shoot for, okay? Herein lies your problem using them on a later 350 Buick. All right, so to think my way around the problem, to make a heavier, dutier, more robust racing version, I bought these heavy duty shafts from TA Performance out in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it's a much thicker shaft, right? Like look at these two. It's the hole in the center on this one. This one's gun drilled. This does not matter on weight. This is stationary and the rocker actually spins on this, okay? So the thicker the shaft, the stronger this shaft is, you would think, right? So what I decided was, I'll run the thick shafts with this rocker, right? Okay, here's a boo-boo, all right? That doesn't fit. What the heck is going on here? Well, you look at the later shaft, later style rocker arms, they slide right on, right? And I'm like, all right, well, what the heck is the problem here? So you get out your handy dandy, super cheap Harbor Freight junk here. And let's see. All right, zero that dude out. Let's measure the shaft diameter. Okay, 0.83029. All right. This one still has quite a bit of oil on it, so let me wipe some of that off. It's actually, I think, Lucas to keep it from rusting. But, all right. All right, so now you can see a considerable difference. 813, right? So you're looking at 16 thousandths difference, all right? That's quite a bit. You really would probably screw an engine up by putting the larger shaft with the smaller, the heads are actually cut to the receiver on the head fits this shaft. And with this being 16 thousandths difference, that's a considerable amount. I don't know if you can squeeze that down in the cylinder head. But there's only one thing to do with this rocker arm. To make this rocker arm work on here is hone it out. That's the only thing you can do as a home mechanic that's building some, you want to be high performance stuff, you hone it out. So I used the wheel cylinder hone. It took me a while just to do a couple of rockers because, I mean, you're talking 16 thousandths, right? So that's quite a bit. But really all it has to do is fit on the shaft loosely. And then the oil fills in the space. You really are only riding on the bottom point anyway. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, look how loose some of these rockers fit, right? So you got quite a bit of wiggle room in there. So I decided, I'm going to hone these out and we're going to make our own set of rocker arms. So here's what I did. All right. Now, there's quite a few things that are different between them all. But really what you find is here's the two big differences between the shafts. If you measure them, it's quite a bit of difference between the two shafts because one is meant to have the freeze plug looking thing on the end. The other one's meant to be held in place with a plastic button through the top, right? So that's what these holes are for. Because they're held in place there, they don't have to worry about the cap on the end. Plus, these are oil through the push rod. That's why the push rod hole looks considerably smaller. It goes from 5/16 to the bigger 3/8 ball here. Or maybe that might be 7/16, I can't remember off the top of my head. But it is a bigger ball on these, and they are oil through the push rod on these style rocker arms, right? Now, there's nothing saying you can't use oil through the push rod, because if you look, it still has a hole in the top here that feeds to here, on the inside of the shaft, right? And that feeds this area. The only problem is, what are you getting down here? Well, that's what this little guy is for. As the rocker's rotating back and forth, this is gleaning off a little bit of oil and shoving it up over the top. And this just runs down the rocker onto your valve and lubricates it that way. Okay, but anyway, that's the other style rocker arm, but it's the same way on the 68, 69 Buick 350 rockers. Okay, so when I made up this set here, I had to come up with some way to capture the end. So what I did is I took the shaft and I tapped it to a 3/8 bolt. Now, what I found is this hole is much bigger than the normal size. For a 3/8 bolt, you normally want a 5/16 hole. But that hole is considerably bigger. And when I ran the tap in there, it created threads, but it did not create deep enough threads for it to really capture it. So what I ended up doing was using one of these small holes, which I believe is 5/16, or I don't remember what the number is at the top of my head. And then I just put a set screw. So you run the bolt in here, and it would tighten up. There just wasn't a lot of thread. And I put thread locker on them. And then I put a set screw down in there and tighten it against the bolt. And it's not going anywhere when you do that. And it's hidden underneath the rocker arm. So it could possibly back out a little bit, but it would have to run into the rocker arm to do such. And that's just not going to happen. All right, so here we are with Buick Small Block Rocker Arm Creation 101. If you go back and look at this set of rockers, I shimmed each one of them up here to put the rocker dead center. Now, I did run into a problem where this rocker on the end, which would be your number 1 cylinder or your number 8 cylinder, depending on which side you have it mounted on, the shim here actually hits the stand. And this shim just keeps it shimmed up off to the side, or it actually keeps it shimmed to where it's dead center of the push rod hole, dead center of the valve. Because this hits the stand, it pushes it off, 10, 15 thousandths, whatever. That creates an issue. So I needed to pull the heads again, because I know I already bolted them down and all that jazz, but I got to pull the heads, and I need to grind the stand just a little bit to clearance it for this shim. And that way everything will line up. It'll be smooth, it'll be top notch, and it'll be about the best that the regular guy could do at home. So that's what we got going on with that. All right, so the other stuff. Here's my head gasket, my replacement head gaskets for when I got to pull the heads back off this 364 small block. I'll put a better set of head gaskets, and I just had some Fel-Pro Permatorques in there, and I was always kind of worried because it is up over 12-to-1 compression, so I decided I would get, now these are custom made, they're made by Flat Out, but you got to order them from a guy named Scott Brown, I think is his name. I ordered them through him, and it took several weeks, and I finally got them. But all right, the other stuff I'm working on, as you can see. All right, so the timing cover. I still got to port and polish the interior of the timing cover, the oil passages. We're going to go through an episode on how to do that. Valve covers. I'm making a set of valve covers. The reason why I'm doing that is I can run 350 Buick valve covers, and if you buy aftermarket 350 Buick valve covers, they cost an arm and a leg. So what I did was I wanted the engine to look like the 215 that came out of there. So I cut the tops off a set of 215 valve covers, and then I cut the bottoms off, the flanges off the Buick 350 valve cover, and I mated the two together and with a torch and a little body working hammer and all that, and I welded them together, right? It isn't perfect. It isn't great. I'm not a fabricator. I'm not a body man. I'm just a regular dude. And I really don't care how it looks down there, because I mean, if somebody is that far down scrutinizing my home built junk box, they need to get their teeth knocked in. This ain't a car show car. But in all actuality, I just wanted it to look right, period, somewhat period correct. Okay, so here's some of the parts I'm playing with. There's two of the different style oil filter assemblies. This one being from a 215. This one is from a 300 and later. Let's see which one I can get the best oil flow out of. Oil pan. All right, so this is this is a project in itself. The baffles here. I bought all this stuff from Speedway Motors as a oil pan fabrication kit. It's really meant for a stock car. Buick 300, 340, 350. You're sucking. Those are the only engines that the pans are interchangeable. And you're absolutely sucking if you're using one of those pans, or if you're looking for one, because nobody reproduces them. Not one person reproduces those pans. And the other thing is, they rust out, and then there is no performance pans available. So you're left with making your own pan, right? And that's what we got going on over there. And I'll show you that here in just a second. Okay, this is from a company I found online. It's a Johnson Ishihara. This is a crank scraper. It was intended for a 300. And the 300 is very close to the 350. It just has a different stroke. The crank's a little bit different. It's got a different main journal size, which actually makes things like this happen, because the bolts are spread out farther. And then when you throw them all together with the way this 364 looks on the bottom end, you get a recipe for weirdness and self-modification. But the good thing is, I bought this because all the pan holes lined up, and all I had to do was trim each one of these spaces to get the crank, the journals, the throws, the rods, and to clear. All right, so here's our oil pan I've been working on for a while. All right, I had one fabricated up that was a rear sump pan. Oh, it was gorgeous. Problem was, the car, 63 Special, because I was looking for a 64 and 5, and they're a rear sump car. The 63 Special is a mid sump. So what I had to do is, like, there's only a couple of mid sump pans, a 215 being one of them. Well, a 215 does not fit on a 300, 340, 350 Buick. The bolt holes are in different spots. The gasket looks similar, but when you buy it, it's completely different. So I took a 300 pan, and all I've done was cut it all up and section it with a 350 Buick pan, because the 300 has a mid-sump pan, and it has to clear the rear steer, which is this part right here. So I've taken the Speedway Motors, you know, stuff that you can, I don't know where it's made at, and I don't care, because if I found out, I'd probably throw it in the trash. It's likely that I made it work in this 215. I actually test fitted it on the swinging block there. Got this oil pan and fitted it down in the car, and it fits nicely. It's got about 1/2 inch clearance all the way around, with the exception of the front of the pan here. I deepened it by, oh man, 1.5 inches, and it's not going to work. It's up against the cross member. Now, it does fit into place, and there is like about 1/1000 of an inch of clearance. But I just started thinking, what happens when I put that, when I put the crank scraper on there? It's going to thicken this up by 1/8 of an inch. And then you're going to have 2 gaskets on it. And so now you're talking, it's probably 1/4 of an inch thicker, and the pan's going to be hitting the cross member of the motor. So I'm going to push it back up probably 1/4 of an inch or a little bit more, and then and modify, probably section it again right around here, and take 1.5 inches out and move it forward so that I don't have this big gap in between the front and the sump. And this is all, like I said, this is just tacked together. There's nothing final, but it's in progress, and that's why it's over there by the cutoff wheel. All right, well, I think that's going to be it for today. I'll hit you with another video in the next few days. Just let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, and until next time, it's Dallas Brown from YouTube TV show. So like, subscribe, tell me I'm a bum, whatever you're going to say. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to continue doing these, and hopefully you like them. All right, thanks. Bye.